So I'm just going to go over motion sensors, the technology they use to see you, and how they turn the lights on, and then some product examples of that, and kind of some usage cases for it. I'll mainly be talking about like a switchbox style motion sensor, this style of motion sensor. So the same sensing technology stuff applies to ceiling sensors as well. So the first thing to keep in mind when you're trying to figure out which type of motion sensor to use in the space is major motion and minor motion. So think of major motion as someone walking down a hallway. So corridor is the best example of that. And then minor motion would be someone sitting at their desk typing. And the reason you got to consider those is because you want different types of motion sensors for that. This sensing technology applies to Watt-Stopper and Cooper lighting motion sensors. So passive infrared technology sees heat in motion, and these have to have line of sight to see you. So if you can't see the sensor, it can't see you. The next type is ultrasonic technology. This uses little sound waves that you can't hear. It fills up the space, and then when there's a disruption in those sound waves, that triggers the sensor to turn on. And then third, you have dual technology, which utilizes both. The main reason you don't just stick dual technology everywhere is cost. Passive infrared is the least expensive option. Ultrasonic's a little more, and then dual technology is more because it includes both of them. It's also not necessary everywhere. If you have a corridor, you're not going to have someone sitting there typing on a computer, so you can just use passive infrared in something like a corridor. And then there's occupancy sensor versus vacancy sensor. So occupancy sensor turns on automatically when you walk into a room and turns off automatically. A vacancy sensor, you have to press the button on it to turn the lights on initially, and then it'll turn off on its own once the sensor times out. This slide is just to show that these sensors do have a lot of adjustability to them. So whether it's time delay, sensitivity, or on dual technology ones, you can actually adjust the logic of how the sensor works. So if you have a space where the HVAC keeps triggering the ultrasonic, which is a common problem sometimes depending on sensor placement, you can turn down the ultrasonic, or you can say, hey, you got to see both ultrasonic and passive infrared before you turn the lights on. So I'll go here to the website. So we'll start with Cooper. So this is the main page of Cooper's website. So if you go here and click on products, that'll take you to the screen. If you know the brand you're looking for, Greengate would be their motion sensors. You can click on that. If you don't, you can go over here to lighting controls section. So they have occupancy and vacancy sensors, and then they have wall box dimmers and sensors. So we'll click on this one, and it brings you to a list of products. So you can, there's dimming ones, there's dual technology ones, passive infrared ones. So you can kind of go from here. If you click on these, you can get to spec sheets as well. And then if you go, this is the Watt-Stopper main page of their website. On this one, you can scroll down, and there's a occupancy vacancy sensor section right here. Click on that, and it gives you a couple categories, high bay, wall box, outdoor motion sensors, wireless stuff. Click on this one. So the good thing about Watt-Stopper's website is they kind of organize them based on popularity, how much they get used. So the stuff that shows up here at the top is the stuff that is commonly used. So that's nice for trying to figure out what you need. I'll hop over here to a cut sheet on one of them. So this one's dual technology on-off motion sensor. An easy way to tell if it's dual technology or ultrasonic is it'll have these little speaker-looking things in the middle. If it's passive infrared only, it will not have those because that's the ultrasonic part of the sensor. Here's an example of the adjustability you can have out of it. So you can change your time delay. 30 minutes is the maximum time delay on motion sensors. That's a code thing, so that's pretty common across the board. Walkthrough mode is just a feature for if it's on, someone walks into the room, the lights turn on, they walk right back out, then the lights will turn back off instead of doing the full time delay to try to save a little extra energy. Passive infrared sensitivity. So for example, if you had this in a room and it it could see out of the door, and every time someone walked past the door, the lights came on, then you could turn down that sensitivity, and that would probably take care of your issue. And then this is the occupancy logic that I was talking about, where you can use passive infrared only, you can use ultrasonic only, you can use both, either. So that helps if you have lights that are staying on or lights that are not turning on. Audible alert, so that just makes it beep before the lights turn off. And then relay mode. So this is where you can switch it from occupancy to vacancy. So the nice thing about all these sensors is there's an option to change it. For the watt stopper stuff, it ships out of California, which they are vacancy there. So all the sensors will show up in vacancy mode. All you gotta do is flip dip switch 8. It's a common thing that we'll get a phone call every now and then that someone will say, hey, my motion sensor is defective. It doesn't automatically turn the lights on. Easy to troubleshoot, right?
Hey, Garrett, one thing, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but for the state of Illinois, their adopted energy code's IECC 2018, so I believe that they have to have vacancy instead of occupancy as well.
Correct. In majority of spaces, there's some exceptions for like corridors and public lobbies and that kind of stuff, but private offices, conference rooms, all that stuff does have to be vacancy. So
Sure.
that's where you would use that.
And the good news is after they've passed their code compliance and the owners in the building and loving it, and if they want to make adjustments at that point, they could always change it back to occupancy instead of vacancy via dip switch if they had to, correct?
Correct. Yeah, no one's going to come back and double check like 2 years later. So it is a nice thing, because then you can make the end user, you can get by on the code. You can have a happy end user that their stuff works the way they want it to.
There's your life hack, everybody. Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a pretty common thing with daylight harvesting as well. End users typically aren't big fans of that, so I think that gets disconnected quite often. This shows how the coverage of the sensor works, this little diagram here. So the beam looking things are the passive infrared beams. So the way that works is it has to see heat in motion, so you would have to break 2 of these beams to trigger the sensor. And then the little bubble is ultrasonic. It's just sound waves that are filling up the space. There can be issues with that if you have open ceilings or like something like a gymnasium that's a very large space. It's not going to work too well. These sensors can be wired in 3-way or single pole. I'm going to show you guys an example. So here's a drawing from a job. These are our symbols we use to do our takeoffs. So D is dual technology, P is passive infrared. So in these small conference room offices in this area, we would use dual technology, because someone's going to walk in, then they're going to sit at their desk and type, or have a meeting, talk to someone. It's not going to be a lot of major motion once they're in that space. Something like this stock room over here, people are going to just be coming in and out, putting stuff in there. And it's a small room where the passive infrared's probably going to see whoever's in there the whole time. So you'd be fine with getting by with passive infrared there. And again, the reason for mixing them up like this is a cost thing. A room like this general storage here, where it's L-shaped, if you put passive infrared here, someone's going to come in, it's going to trigger the sensor. But then if they get back here and start doing something, working, stacking a shelf, whatever it may be, then the light's going to turn off on them, because it won't be able to see them around this corner. So there, it'd probably be better to use dual technology just to be on the safe side. In case someone is in the back of that room working, then you can still pick them up and keep the lights on for them.
Hey, Garrett, on that, going back to that larger storage room real quick. So whoever drew up this drawing shows a ceiling mount aux sensor in there, but you think that would be an okay space to have maybe a dual tech or an ultrasonic only on the switch location?
Yeah, you could do that. Or, you could use the ceiling sensor, right? The ceiling sensor would be just fine in that area, because you could put it right here around the corner where they show it, and it could see both ways around. But if there's situations where you have to use wall box sensors in spaces like this for whatever reason it may be. Maybe it's open ceiling, something like that. So you could go either way with that one.
Okay, thanks. And just so everyone knows, today we're mainly focusing just on switch replacement style or switch style occupancy and vacancy sensors.
So a good example of an ultrasonic application would be a restroom that has partitions or stalls in it. So these style restrooms where you have different stalls in them, that would be an application that you'd want to use ultrasonic only. And the reason I say ultrasonic only is because if you have a dual technology one, typically the way those are set from the factory is if the light turns off, then both technologies have to see you to turn it back on. Once it's on, if either one sees you, it maintains the lights on. But once it turns off, they both have to see you. So if someone's in the stall back here, the lights turn off and they have a dual technology sensor, it's not going to turn the lights back on until they can see that motion sensor, or it can see them. So if you have ultrasonic only and the lights turn off on you in a situation like that, you could just clap your hands, wave your arms, and the lights would turn back on. Okay. I'll show you guys a couple more product examples. So both Cooper and Wattstopper now have models of this type of sensor, and what this is an occupancy or vacancy sensor with 0 to 10 volt dimming built in. So that means in, like in Illinois where you have to have vacancy, you can also do partial auto on in some spaces. So if you walk into the room, the lights will turn on to 50% instead of all the way on, and this device can do that for you. So this is a good one for getting all your boxes checked for your code compliance out of one device in the wall.
Hey Garrett, we have a question about multi-way applications, and basically it is when using a three-way application, do both locations of the wall box sensor provide control to the circuit?
Yes. Yeah, so both locations could turn the lights on and off, and even with this one, both locations could dim. Both the sensors function on both of them, so it's just like having one but in two spots. They both have the same functionality.
Well, thank you.
So that's another nice thing about this is you can get three-way dimming functionality out of it. It will dim from either location, and then you can walk to the other location, raise it back up, or vice versa. So it's nice for medium-sized conference room with 2 entrances or something like that. The only difference on wiring with this is it has a purple and gray for the dimming to the fixtures. So that would have to go out and hit every light fixture. Sorry guys, got some barking coworkers. So, like I said, these are a nice application. We use these a lot in private offices now, especially over on the Illinois side. So something to keep in mind, one device that'll get you by on all your code stuff. Here's the Cooper lighting one. So if you notice, the Wattstopper one just has up-down arrow. Up is on, down is off. The Cooper one has an on-off button and a raise lower. So some people like one style better, some people like the other better. That is all I have for right now, unless you guys have any questions on anything. Try to keep it short and simple.
Yeah, I'll go.